I want to welcome Agile XRM to the podcast. I've known the people at Agile XRM for the past 12 years. I've seen how their business process management tool can add massive value to complex organizational processes in sectors such as finance and government. If you have complex processes or a need for dialogues on the Power Platform or Dynamics 365, take a look at how this BPM tool can add value. You can find them at agilexrm.com or check out the show notes for more details. Welcome to the Power 365 show, where I interview staff at Microsoft across the Power Platform and Dynamics 365 technology stack. I hope you'll find this podcast educational and inspire you to do more with this great technology. Now, let's get on with the show. In this episode, we'll be discussing the Dataverse. Today's guest is from Washington in the US. He works as a director of product management at Microsoft. You can find links to his LinkedIn, Twitter, and any kind of blogs and content that he has out there in the show notes. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you on. Good to be discussing Dataverse. I think Ryan Jones was the last person many moons ago, maybe 3 years ago, we had a discussion on Dataverse.
That's
and
awesome.
Of course, it's a different beast.
It's grown. And I think the first question I answer after, what is Dataverse is what happened to Ryan Jones? And I'm the new Ryan Jones. So
Is that right? It was so funny because it did come up about, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago on a MVP side channel chat. Where's Ryan Jones gone? And I was like, Well, last I saw him, he was in Customer Data Platform. Right. Sorry, Customer Insights is where he was. Yes. And that's where I understand he moved to. And that was from MVP Summit conversations with him then.
And ironically, my previous role before joining Dataverse was in our insights area, supporting some of the teams like Customer Insights and some of the industry cloud investments there. So he and I passed like ships in the night.
Wow.
Me to Dataverse and he to the insights world. So go figure, right?
So some things just popped to mind when, mentioning his name now and I remember when he first joined the team and he told me some stuff, probably more off record stuff around what he landed in, as in, the product had evolved in a very different way pre-James Phillips, as in I'm talking about the Dynamics suite of products. And there was kind of like five core messages. And I know one was around stabilizing the platform, high availability, and there were some other things, including the word can of worms, that needed work on. And so that was 3-4 years ago, right? And we've seen I suppose a lot of people, a lot of companies are now come in and join the platform and being part of it. And I'm always interested in understanding or getting people that are working with it to how do you articulate the Dataverse? How do you talk about it in a to start with, let's say go non-technical terms, from the point of view, people go, oh, is it another database? How do you tell the story of what is the Dataverse and why, Dynamics, Power Apps, etc., the whole gamut, why aren't they just built on Azure, SQL, and, or any other high availability storage directly on a data lake or something like that?
That's right. Well, I think that's a great question. So maybe the explain like I'm five answer is that I think of Dataverse as, yes, it is much more than just another SQL database. The way that we think about Dataverse is it is effectively Azure in a box, right? And it's aspiring to bring a low-code data platform to bear in an approachable way. So it's as easy as building an Excel table, building kind of related tables together, and building kind of your data model, just like you would do in, say, building a list in SharePoint Online, right? Yeah. And the key point is that we're doing so by actually leveraging so much more than just Azure SQL. And sure, that's where our roots are. But we have, for example, the ability to have essentially a fully scalable data platform where we support relational and non-relational data, images, files, relevant search, or yes, more analytical data on the data lake. That's all behind the scenes. And so we're not just Azure SQL, we're actually, think of all of the Azure data services brought together first and foremost. And that is kind of part about being a data platform. But I think the other part of it is the fact that our aspirations are not to build a set of PaaS services that developers can go build their own solutions on top of.
Yeah.
And if you go try to build an application, a web application or a mobile application on top of Azure PaaS, you need more than just storage, right?
Mm-mm-mm.
And the thing is that we also bring those other types of, be it events, business logic, insights, security, extensibility, and ALM. And of course, it's an API tier atop of it. Like, we bring those to bear as well as a part of the platform, because first and foremost, Dataverse is built on Azure. It is built on all these composite technologies. So we aspire to be not just another SQL database, but essentially that full platform for bringing your data and then be able to build kind of internet-connected applications and processes atop that, be it through the Power Platform or for Dynamics, or through other means in the next 3 years to come. Right?
Yeah.
So that was a really long explain my 5, but effectively, Dataverse is not an Azure SQL database. It's Azure in a box, in other words.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Because, I remember back in the day when we had things on-prem, and so pre anything online. And back then, you'd have to set up your front-end servers, your back-end servers, your SQL for servers, your Exchange servers. There was a lot more than just storage, right? There was a lot more than just the database that you had to line up. There was a whole bunch of other services. And of course, I like the way you describe that. It's Azure really in a box in a highly API-driven consumable way, including all compute, memory, etc. And of course, there's multiple storage technologies now used in the platform. There was, when that shift happened, when we saw the splitting away of data into things like blob storage and Cosmos DB, has there been any more thinking, has there been much of an evolution under the hood of what's going on? Like, one of the things that I remember a couple of years ago at a conference hassling Ryan over was, are you thinking about, how are you thinking about AI at a platform level? Like, is there learning that could happen, whether it's design protocols or I don't know, like, how do you think, I suppose my question was two parts to him. How are you thinking about security at something that would never potentially be surfaced, and AI that would potentially even be surfaced, but was creating a more robust, intelligent system or ecosystem that you've created with the Dataverse?
So I think security and AI are both separate beasts in and of themselves, but of course they're interconnected. So I think if you look at, first of all, like where Dataverse came from, right? This very operational world kind of, and AI was very transactional in that, right? AI Builder, kind of like when it was launched, actually it might have been like more like 3 years ago, right? It was very much around bringing AI to this transactional business process, right? I want to recognize this form. I want to process this image, right? And that continues to be the case today. And and the way we brought in AI Builder is it's effectively a first-party component. It's kind of a composite part of that business process, the same way you would string together, a plugin call, an extensibility call, a triggering a flow. So it's just kind of part of the platform. Now, where I think about security and AI going forward, and you mentioned kind of these new storage paradigms, and I think that's where things do become interesting, because part about Dataverse living up to its moniker as more than just a SQL database, it has to live up to the fact that it's more about just highly normalized relational models of data based on SQL. And we leverage Cosmos DB when we want to optimize for certain types of workloads and certain types of high performance lookups, right? We want to leverage the appropriate search capabilities at cognitive search behind the scenes when we want to index things based off of certain types of query patterns, right? We want to use ADLS and data lake technologies for more analytical scenarios, right? And so I think the point I'm getting to is that Dataverse is expanding to these other storage technologies, right? And the way we build on the current extensibility paradigms, right? The types of capabilities, and take AI as an example, how does it plug into kind of a real-time or even an event streaming type of workload that we pull together? How do you bring AI to an analytical space where data is not as highly normalized? It's in star schema, it's at a different scale. And this is on the forefront of our thinking right now. And I'll give you one example, that one of the scenarios we're we're doing right now, and although I think it's on our release notes, is the fact that we'll be supporting essentially seamless archival of data from our operational store to our cold storage. So every Dataverse environment now comes with essentially data lake technology, right? And what you'll be seeing kind of this fall is the fact that you can set up archival policies for your environment to start moving that data. It's still there, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be moving from that kind of hot storage of SQL to the colder storage of data lake underneath the covers. And guess what? We're going to bring compute like Synapse to bear to your same app, your same APIs. That's still going to be honored. That same security for your operational scenarios are going to be honored. But we're moving things to a different place, right? And number one, that's powerful to live up to the data platform moniker versus just the SQL database moniker. But then the fact that that data can also be made available in that kind of this more file-based paradigm. Now we're thinking about how do we bring new AI paradigms to bear, because you can store more data in data lake. You can bring together more interconnected data together to run kind of new types of AI models. This is what you see, for example, a lot of customers doing even with Synapse Link of Dataverse, but they drop that data into Synapse. They have pipelines to bring together the rest of their data together from their enterprise to orchestrate, new insights, new features, AML workloads, Synapse Spark type of workloads, right? And they're doing that today, leveraging kind of like past technology. But what if you could do that within Dataverse? And that's certainly that's on our mind as we kind of expand the technologies. How do we bring more value to bear over time, if that makes sense?
So it's obviously getting, when you say Azure in a box, it's definitely starting to consume a lot of the other services available on Azure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is the BizApps team, which a lot of it is underpinned with Dataverse, is it the biggest consumer of Azure nowadays? I think there's talk of it.
It depends on which meter you're looking at. I think we're certainly up there, if not the highest, in terms of Azure SQL.
Yeah.
And some of the compute paradigms were certainly up there. And growing in Cosmos DB, growing in ADLS, and growing in some of and if you look at like Azure Cognitive Search, right? Yeah. I'm not sure if we're the number one vendor in all of those, but we are absolutely growing. And I'd say probably holistically, we're probably up there for some of the most Azure consumed revenue of any kind of ISV out there.
Yeah.
I think it's the best way of explaining kind of why Dataverse is because we aspire to bring the value of what you would have to compile on your own with those requisite technologies. And we're trying to bring those to bear in a low code way so that you can accelerate your own development and not have to manage all those pieces yourself.
Yeah. If we look at the origins of where Dataverse came from, there would have been choices made back then in architecture around field types. And I was on another call with somebody around the tool to migrate access-based databases into the environment. And there was some limitation around, it might have been floating point, is it? That there's different size between the way Access and Dataverse treat it. When you think of it, are there any things that you think that at some point you're going to need to tackle around what's legacy that is not either, well, your telemetry will tell you if it's not being used, I suppose it's an easier decision, but around perhaps not what's legacy, but what are you thinking about new? What should be additive because of the way the world has changed, whether we're getting closer to things like quantum computing and things like that. Like we know so much more than we did 18 years ago when I first started with, dynamics. The technology's advanced so much. So when you're looking at that and data structures, what are you thinking?
To me, I don't actually think of it as in terms of kind of like a data type for a column. I actually think part of the revolution that's coming is that there's a couple things that are going on, and I think Dataverse is kind of at the center of it. I think number one, I think that people believe that, because we have cloud, that, for example, every company has realized their digital transformation.
Yeah.
And far from it. I mean, we far from, I think, realize the amount of data that even had kind of moves from on-prem to the cloud, right? And I think there's a second thing, which is that I think that there are other essentially paradigms of data that we've only yet to really tackle and bring into kind of even just thinking around like more line of business type scenarios. Like we haven't yet realized what it means to stream video, right? And have that be interconnected and trigger workflows, right?
Wow.
Like we can't even like to be honest with you, we're having trouble just like streaming events from a website and to be able to act on them, right? Because if you look at like, there's so much structure and value to kind of a common CRM record, and there's so much rich semantics around it, and the onus you're taking on the person entering it, and you can take real clear action on that. But the same cannot be said for a stream of data coming in for a particular process. Less can be said around a stream of bytes about a bunch of images coming in. And so to me, like that is one thing that not only like just the historical operational data, all of that has yet to be digitized, let alone these new streams of data, which are much less rich, but will be much more higher in volume. And that to me is, I think, the kind of next horizon that business apps and I think a lot of cloud technologies and cloud data have to figure out how we're going to tackle. And to me, AI, to go back to your previous conversation, is part of that, because how else are you going to build a business process around a stream of event data or a stream of video if there's not something automatically kind of deriving some meaning or semantics around it that you can tie essentially a process to, right? It's not really that possible. And so I think there's so much, to me, that's really, really interesting. And it's kind of like that next horizon of data scale that we have to figure out, right? And the good news is that there's a bunch of really smart people in Azure building past technologies. There's a bunch of people in the industry pushing the needle on that. And so I'm confident that maybe not quite as far out as quantum computing, but just talking about like bringing more data in through different paradigms, I am confident that like that is very much in our wheelhouse in the next 3 years to go and start to realize some of those scenarios even within the realm of Dataverse, I think.
Nice. Tell us about turnkey insights. What are you thinking there?
I mean, when I think turnkey insights, I ask the question, when's the last time that you've shipped an end-to-end business process without a report in it, right? When's the last time someone's looked at that report and not asked a question, right? And how hard was it when you asked that question? How much work was it to go like add that back, right? And then my last question would be, once you have that insights, didn't you ask like, hey, why isn't that back in my source system for me to act upon in a meaningful way? And right. And so to me, it's just the more scenarios I see brought to the platform, and I think a great example of them was at Lumen Field, which is one of the stadiums here in the Puget Sound area. When they were doing vaccine management, they chose the Power Platform, right? And so they were literally doing, registrations on a portal, that data flowing into Dataverse, people running Power Apps on tablets, checking people in, and there was an operational report in Power BI connected to Dataverse right there, tracking everything, tracking inventory, driving processes. And so like to me, like in a nutshell, turnkey insights is about, you can't have an end-to-end solution that's really complete these days that doesn't have analytics and visualizations that are part of that. And we can do so much more than just, in my mind, build a bunch of reports and statements on top of our data. Like we can actually derive insights and add a lot on top of that. And to me, that's really what it's a part of, because I just think it's just an inherent part of any composite solution that customers ends up piecing together. And we should make much more turnkey within the platform today. And that is some area that we're trying to actively invest in.
I like it. You mentioned healthcare there, as in with the COVID scenario, building apps out and the data sitting within Dataverse. Tell me about some other industries that you're seeing, without mentioning names, like really embrace the technology like that, that you're like, wow, you're pushing the limits. We love this.
Well, I don't even have to not name names, because like the cool thing is Microsoft has the industry clouds, right? And it's really part and parcel with the way that Microsoft sells One Microsoft to customers, right? And there is a cloud for healthcare. There is a cloud for retail. There is a cloud for sustainability, right? There is a cloud for financial services. And guess what? They're all built on Dynamics apps, which are built on Dataverse, right? And the way that they go to market is they go to market with these applications that are built on the platform, and they are able to customize and tailor them even within those industries to the workloads of the customers, right? And that's the power of the platform, right? And so like, I don't have to go too far. I can name names because it is a core part of the way that Microsoft lands that one Microsoft vision with our cloud strategy. And actually there's, if you do get another person on your podcast, you should try to get some either Corey Sanders or someone for that team, because, he's helping lead that strategy within kind of Scott Gu's organization right now, for how we're really going after those kind of industry plays.
I like it. I don't know, in your role, I know other people in your team does, where you'd go out and meet with some clients from time to time, right? You might be involved in some executive briefings and such. What do you do when a CTO says to you, so tell us about the limitations? Like, just like a job interview, you'd say, so what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? That type of thing. What are the things how do you explain limitations with the technology?
Well, so like, maybe I'll give you a couple examples, right? So, if you take kind of like the 4 tenets of like what we aspire to be, like what do we think makes Dataverse unique, right? They are as follows. We believe that we have the potential to be kind of as easy as Excel, but connected to your full enterprise data. We believe that we can accelerate your development by bringing the power of Azure in like low code functional language, like server-side language. We believe we bring enterprise grade security and compliance that you've already implemented within your trusted clouds. We believe that we're this planet scale data platform that has no limits, right? These are these 4 tenets. But I would say that like, look, yeah, we aspire to be as easy, right? But it's still too hard today, right? And customers, the activation energy is too much. People are able to figure it out, right? But it's because, and once they see that value, they keep building on it, but it is too hard, right? It is not approachable enough, right? Like, we do bring the power of Azure to bear, but there's still too much pro code. There's too much in JavaScript. There's too much in plugins that are full code, right? We do bring the power of those hundreds of hours that customers spent configuring security and compliance for M365 and Azure. And we bring that to bear, but it's not turnkey, right? You do have to configure more controls. You do have to understand kind of our security concerns. We don't do enough by default, right? And we aspire to be this planet scale data platform, but there are still limits today, right? We're still proving that out, right? Like, many customers have to kind of like even delete or build their own archival solutions today, right? In order to not hit some of those limits. And we know that. So like, what I would say is that, look, like, we are heads and tails where we were 3 years ago when this face was that of Ryan Jones and there was red hair here. Okay. And so we have advanced every single one of these kind of value props. Like, we've shipped better maker experiences. There is more that's easier, that's brought to Power Effects and easier to build on. There is so much more you get out of box in terms of security, and our limits have gone up probably tenfold since then, but we have a long way to go. Right, is basically what I would say, and that's why like we have a core product team. This is core to the BizApp strategy. This is like in my mind, if we achieve kind of like the goals that Charles has set forward for kind of his organization, right? Like, Dataverse has to grow. We have to scale to the next scale of workloads and the next order of magnitudes of customers in order for us to be successful. And we will. I'm very confident in that.
I like it. It's been a very interesting discussion with you, James. I've enjoyed it. Is there any final things that are top of mind that you'd like to say before I let you go?
Well, I think number one, I'd like to hear from the New Zealand community around both why Dataverse and why not Dataverse, right? And so I think the feedback from the community, right, is golden and treasure, right? And, we do believe we have something here, and we do believe we have a long way to go. And so please give us that feedback. We were joking before the podcast started, which is maybe I won't be able to get out to New Zealand, but if there are opportunities or user groups to come in and hear that feedback, I am game and my team are game, because we think we have something special here. We think that Microsoft has something special here with the Power Platform, with Dynamics, with the platform that kind of spans it all. And so, if you're interested, if you're building on top of it, if you couldn't build something, let us know. Let me know. I'm really interested to hear that feedback, because we have to figure it out, in my mind.
Well, the Azure data centers open in New Zealand about mid next year. And of course, once the M365 workloads are moved in and stabilized, of course, Dynamics will be a short step behind, and Dataverse and everything Power Plat. So maybe you should come for the big launch party that I'm sure is going to happen once we've got our own data centers in country.
What do they do instead of breaking champagne? Do they break a dev box or a storage?
I'd hope it's still champagne.
Fair enough.
Even though it's not a ship, but it's going to be phenomenal. Anyhow, thanks, James.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Application MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 guy. If there's a guest you'd like to see on the show from Microsoft, please message me on LinkedIn. If you want to be a supporter of the show, please check out buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 guy. How will you create on the Power Platform today? Ciao.